Ramadan is known as the most holy month of the year for Muslims, when they fast from dawn to dusk. But less well known is that Ramadan is also a time for eating. Lots of eating. Every day at dusk, Muslims break the fast. Food is central to their faith. Dishes are prepared with exotic ingredients and according to recipes that go back centuries. You might think that this food is only eaten by Muslims, but no.
Well, I'm planning to have a curry tonight if I don't make steak and onion sandwiches.
Actually, it's the kind of food millions of Britons eat every day of the year in restaurants and at home. And that's the story I want to tell you about tonight. My name is Shappy Corsandi.
Hello.
Tonight, I'm going to tell you how food and drink from the Muslim world has helped revolutionise British cuisine from the bland to the exotic.
So for the British people, spice brings a vibrance into their food.
Wow.
And even how it's changed who the Brits are, because if we are what we eat, as the famous saying goes, then this is also a story about Britain's evolution as a nation.
Probably spent more on curry than I did on my mortgage at one stage.
Welcome to Spice Britain.
Delicious.
Welcomes. I talked last time a lot about being Iranian, and people tweeted me going, "Are you really Iranian?" I'm like, no, I just say that to be more popular.
You may know me from my stand-up shows, but tonight it's cooking, not comedy, that's on the bill. I was born in Iran, but came here with my parents and my brother when I was 3. It was 1976. Britain had a reputation for having the blandest palate on the planet, and my mother wasn't taking any chances.
She came to Britain with a massive suitcase full of dried limes, dried coriander, dried dill, anything you can think of. She bought saffron, she bought fresh pistachios, and she bought a pumice stone. She didn't think they had pumice stones in England. She has very soft feet, my mother.
But what the British did have was steak and kidney pie, bacon and eggs, and meat and 2 veg.
Even my pedad, my father, who loves his adopted land, often used to say, English food is amazing. It takes great effort to make something taste this bad.
35 years later, none of my mother's emergency rations would raise an eyebrow. The Brits love their herbs and spices.
You could argue that having an empire that covered 2/3 of the subcontinent was bound to have an effect. But other countries had colonies too. France, Spain, Holland, Portugal, but none of them embraced migrant food with quite the same gusto as the British.
Manchester is typical of the rest of the UK in its love of spice. The Curry Mile in Rusholme claims a concentration of over 70 Asian and Middle Eastern takeaways and restaurants in its 1-mile stretch.
I really like curry, yeah. I like spicy food. It's quite healthy. The ingredients are always quite fresh.
Traditionally, ours is quite bland. We're very much, meat, potatoes, veg, and then some salt and pepper, maybe. But here is just all the different colours as well, brighter colours.
Different
maybe.
spices.
Yeah.
Normally go for a chicken madras, if I'm being honest, but anything hot.
I ordered about, say, 15 years ago, a madras, and I've never touched one since. Yeah, I love curries, they're lovely.
I always leave with a real satisfied sort of glow after a curry.
So where does our passion for herbs and spices come from? Well, Manchester's John Rylands University Library may have one answer, a revealing manuscript which suggests that it goes back a long way.
It's a very tiny, battered manuscript. It was a cookery book compiled by the master chefs of Richard II around about 1390. It contains approximately 200 recipes that were used in the royal court at that time.
The list of ingredients show that the British already had a passion for herbs and spices from the Middle East. Many would have been brought back to Britain by returning crusaders.
They were using ginger extensively, cardamom, cloves, garlic. Many of the spices, such as saffron, were phenomenally expensive, and so they would have been reserved for the highest echelons of the court.
Thankfully, today there are no class barriers stopping me from sampling one of John's favourite recipes.
Tart in Imberday. Take and parboil onions and herbs and hew them small. Take bread and break it in a mortar and temper it.
Wow. That tastes very medieval. It's kind of taste of Christmas and pie at the same time. You've got the spicy currantiness of it and the sort of comfort foody, this is going to sit on my thighs for the rest of my life kind of mixture. It's nice.
So it seems that the British taste for the exotic goes back a very long way. You just had to be pretty rich to enjoy it. So when did the British love affair with spice really start? The first real attempt to bring Eastern taste to the people came in the 19th century. And it happened here in the exclusive Portman Square area of West London. Now a Japanese restaurant, this is the site of the first ever British curry house, the Hindustani, opened in 1809 at number 34 George Street. It was the brainchild of a Muslim aristocrat, Sake Dean Mohammed.
With an eye for publicity, Dean took out an ad in the Times. Let me just say that the Times clearly charged for advertisements by the sentence. Mohammed is offering Indian dishes in the highest perfection and allowed by the greatest epicures to be unequalled to any curries ever made in England, with choice wines and every accommodation, and now looks up to them for their future patronage and support, and gratefully acknowledges himself indebted for their former favours and trusts it will merit the highest satisfaction when made known to the public.
Mohammed's vision was to recreate the atmosphere of the Raj with a menu aimed at those who'd come back from serving the empire and missed the Anglo-Indian flavour of dishes like mulligatawny and kedgeree. Today, of course, there's quite a few upmarket curry restaurants evoking the time of the Raj. But sadly, Mohammed was ahead of his time.
People had no concept of restaurants. People didn't go out to eat. You went in to eat. So it was dinner parties, and your social standing was based on who had the best dinner party and who you met at such a dinner party.
After 3 years in the restaurant business, Dean Mohammed went bankrupt. It was a false dawn. The British masses were not yet ready to fall under the spell of curry. But they were ready to fall in love with something else.
I like a nice cup of tea in the morning.
Some of us wouldn't be able to start the day without it.
And at 11:30, well, my
yes, you guessed it. Coffee. The origins of coffee lie with Muslims, Bedouins, who discovered coffee beans in Ethiopia in the 9th century.
Didn't realise that coffee is an Islamic drink.
No, I didn't know. It was the invention of the Arabs.
I thought it was invented by the Brazilians.
I've come to one of a handful of coffee houses on London's Edgware Road which sells strong Arabica coffee, but 300 years ago they were everywhere.
It has to be said that coffee caused quite a stir when it first arrived in the Western world via the Ottoman Empire. As legend has it, Pope Clement VIII was under pressure to ban what everyone was calling Satan's drink because of its connections with the Islamic world. After a couple of sips, though, he was converted, and in 1600 he gave it the papal seal of approval with a baptism.
50 years later, Britain too was converted. By the 18th century, London was the coffee capital of the world. There was one coffee house for every 300 inhabitants. That's more than there is in London today. The Jerusalem Tavern is now a pub, but it evokes much of the same atmosphere and features of an 18th century coffee house. At that time, the whole experience of coffee drinking was a very Arabic affair.
The idea was to recreate a kind of Ottoman experience. People would sit around and talk a lot, people would smoke a lot, so they were very noisy, smoky, active kind of places. People keep talking about walking into a coffee house and hearing this sort of hubbub, this busyness, which they associated both with staying awake, because that's what coffee did to you, but also with, with commerce and with getting things done.
To this day, people come to coffee houses to do business or simply enjoy the hubbub. But having taken off in a big way at the start, coffee didn't stay the course. Another false dawn. It was pipped to the post by tea, which was a cheaper import. Tea quickly became the national drink. And so, for the next 200 years, the British got on with eating their meat and two veg, washed down with tea by the gallon, doing their reputation for blandness no good at all.
Does me no harm.
So what changed to make the British fall in love with spice? The change came in the 1950s. The British Empire had sown the seeds of the spice revolution. Now, thousands of immigrants from the former empire, mainly from the Indian subcontinent, arrived in Britain. And remarkably, most of those who were to fuel the growth in curry houses were Muslims from one small region called Sylhet in what is now Bangladesh.
I'll have tandoori king prawn starter, please.
Chicken and sag for a change?
Yes, please. With extra garlic, extra cheese.
Babu Rahman's father came here from Sylhet in 1959 and opened his restaurant in Manchester 5 years later.
On the day of opening the restaurant, chef said, "We can't open the restaurant, we have no tomatoes." And my father said, "I don't have any money." The chef borrowed him some shilling because there were shilling days. The first customer came through the door. After 48 years, still he comes.
John Pemberton was 18 when he ordered his first curry at the Azad Manzil.
I think it was about 6 shilling for a chicken curry and rice, and it was delicious. You either got a leg or a breast rested on top of the dish with the curry sauce underneath it. I think we were the only people in the first time we came in, but people get used to it, and it got that way on a Saturday night. It got really full, you know.
To this day in the UK, around 70% of curry houses are Muslim, whereas Hindu and Sikh restaurants account for the rest. So when we say we're going out for an Indian, we're more likely to be eating Bangladeshi.
Curry has an even stronger link to Muslim history than is commonly known. Not only do most of the people who make it in the UK come from a Muslim background, but their cooking has very strong influences of a powerful Muslim empire that ruled most of India for over 200 years. It's got a bit of a personal interest to me as well, because it touches on the culture of my native Persia.
Dr. Amjad Hussain has studied the effect of the 200-year rule of the Mughals on Indian cuisine, which began in the 17th century.
The Mughals were Muslims ruling a Hindu majority in India. They originated from Central Asia. They were very big meat eaters. They were Muslims. Meat was important for them in comparison to the Hindus, who did not eat meat, majority of them. So what you find is that they influenced Indian cooking by bringing all this meat.
As well as meat, the Mughals brought outside cultural influences into India, which resulted in some of today's favourite Indian dishes like danzak, do piyaza and rogan josh.
But maybe the most famous thing that they did was to bring the pilau of Central Asia and the pilau of Persia, which was much more advanced, to India. And what they did was fuse that with the spicy rice of India, and together that created the classic dish called biryani.
When the first restaurants opened in the UK, these Mughal influences were rather too sophisticated for the customers. In the 70s, when Babu Rahman started working in his father's restaurant, diners were so fussy that they had to create dishes especially tailored for the British palate that really had nothing to do with the recipes back home.
Korma, the way we serve korma in Bangladesh, is totally different than what we serve here. Masala is a created dish. Madras, I would say this was created. Hardly people would eat rice. If they were having a curry, definitely they will have curry and chips.
Even in the early days, Babu tried hard to introduce authentic tastes.
When I decided to sell proper basmati rice, and when I started it, people used to say, smell of socks. And I got very annoyed. Bloody hell. Customer not appreciated, and believe me, I said to the chef, come on, move. Let's go back to the old dumb chips.
During the 70s, the British fell in love with curry, even if it was for the chips. But the problem was not everyone loved the people.
Oh, piss off! On your way!
This was a decade marred by racism and abuse. Babu faced intimidation on a daily basis.
I sometimes used to feel frightened going to the restaurant. The culture of the customers were to, if I may allow to say with my own word, get drunk and go to a Paki restaurant and let's get a piss out of them. That's what was the culture.
Part of the racial abuse was not paying for the meal. It's taken over 30 years, but at least one old customer with a guilty conscience has felt the need to make up for their past behaviour with an email to Babu.
He said, I used to come to this restaurant in 70s, and many times I've done a runner without paying. Please accept my apology. That's a wonderful thing. It's a lovely, someone is apologizing. I hope he's watching. Yes, your apology has been accepted.
Thankfully, those days are long gone, and I don't just mean the abuse. Today, many Muslim restaurant owners are confidently serving authentic food, no longer pandering to British tastes. Gram Bangalore Brick Lane is owned by third-generation Bangladeshi Abdul Shahid. There's only one style of cooking he wants in his restaurant.
It's a type of food that my mother's been feeding me since my childhood. And Mum's cooking you never forget. That's why the menu consists of majority of the fish dishes of Bangladesh. I feel everybody should be proud of their own heritage. My sign is written in such a way that I'm incorporating two identities. GB, which stands for Great Britain. Also, I've got GB stands for Gram Bangla, which is village Bangla. And I feel proud of it. And I just wanted to flaunt what I've got.
Customers have changed too. Nowadays, authenticity sells.
I do prefer the traditional curries, not like the ones that you can get in certain restaurants that are full of sugar and so on. The traditional ones are the best.
Well, my favourite food in this restaurant, I've been coming for over 20 years, is traditional kadhai gosht, which is a lamb dish. And the recipe is really original. And that is I think most of the customers here, that's the most popular dish.
Curry has had a remarkable effect on the British taste buds. No longer derided as the bland beef eaters of Europe, the British are actually beginning to get a reputation for good taste and good cooking. In no small part thanks to a handful of pioneering restaurants in the 1950s. Today, the UK has a staggering 9,000 curry houses and an industry worth over £3 billion. But curry's influence goes deeper. It's paved the way for food from other parts of the Muslim world, which alongside European and world food has made British palates amongst the most sophisticated anywhere. Since the Second World War, more people have arrived from other parts of the Muslim world, from the Mediterranean and the Middle East, bringing new tastes and new flavours. Lebanese, Turkish, Moroccan, Egyptian, and my own Persian.
So this is the traditional Iranian chilo kebab, soul food.
That's rice served with roasted meat.
Lovely. Just a little piece of bread, just a little piece of bread. That's all it is. I'm very hungry today.
In Iran, naan or noon is the general word for bread. That's leg of lamb with rice, sultanas and hazelnuts.
And this is our traditional drink, yogurt drink, called doogh. Very tasty, sour, salty. I hope you enjoy.
This traditional Persian drink is called doogh. It's a bit of an acquired taste. It looks like the Indian lassi, but it's actually very, very salty. And it is an acquired taste. I've had English friends describe it to taste like salt water, seawater, but what do they know? Oh, that's heavenly. Absolutely heaven. When I first moved to the UK, there weren't that many Middle Eastern restaurants, so the Iranian community would congregate in places like this. I'm in Upper Dana restaurant in Kensington, and I remember coming here when I was 4 and 5 years old, and my parents and their friends would be dancing and singing and drinking and smoking, and I would sleep here on this very bench until someone was ready to take me home.
There may have been few Middle Eastern restaurants in Britain when I was a little girl, but there was revolution in the air, or rather on the airwaves.
Moroccan food is the most exotic of the Mediterranean.
During the 1980s, cookery pioneers like Claudia Roden brought Middle Eastern cuisine into millions of homes.
I used to try and tell people that pita there was a bread with a pouch in it. People kept saying, how can a bread have a pouch? Now you get pita bread everywhere, and you get hummus in it, and you get aubergines, which nobody ate before.
Claudia believes that when it comes to food, the British have come a long way from bland.
I think once upon a time they were Puritans, and now they're hedonists. They are the big hedonists of the world.
Claudia not only broadened our love affair with food from Muslim lands, she was also part of a revolution in the 1980s and 90s which changed what we cooked for ourselves at home. Meat and 2 veg was no longer the only item on the menu.
The most compelling evidence that Middle Eastern and Muslim tastes have become part of the mainstream, we don't have to look any further than the British shopping trolley.
Unlike 60 years ago, we can choose from an astonishing range of food. Fresh foods such as aubergine, mango, olives and kebabs. Then there's chickpeas, jars of tahini and hummus. Herbs and spices such as curry leaf, ginger, chilli and the best-selling herb in Britain, coriander. There's no denying that in the last 60 years, British tastes have changed beyond recognition.
Indian, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern.
We have more rice, we have more couscous, we have bulgur wheat, we eat everything.
Food from the Muslim world, which began as an exotic treat in restaurants, has finally made the long journey to our kitchen table. The love affair with food from Muslim lands has changed the British palate, but buried in this story is another tale. If we are what we eat, then who are we? Food has been an important way of breaking down the barriers towards a more diverse and tolerant society. But there's still some way to go.
I believe, due to the circumstances today, we need to learn about each other now. And for us to know the importance of this is that when we go home, we think, oh, that was very nice food made by a Muslim. That is, oh, that was a great person who spoke to me in the restaurant. And they were all Muslims. And we learn to appreciate each other.
Of course, eating the food is still only scratching the surface of Muslim culture. But there are signs of a deeper encounter. It's coming in the form of another import from the East.
The coffee houses of the Muslim world may have been hounded out of Britain over 200 years ago, but they're making a comeback in a different form, the shisha lounge. Shisha, hubble bubble, or if you're Iranian, qelyun is essentially a water pipe.
By using one of these, tobacco smoke is cooled by drawing it through water. Of course, smoking shisha is just as dangerous to the health as alcohol and cigarettes. It was invented about 600 years ago, ironically, by an Iranian doctor and quickly spread across the Muslim world. In Britain, it's now popular amongst students as an alternative to the boozy night out.
You get white people, you get Asians, you get Arabs, you get black people, you get everything basically, and it's just a place to come and chill and just, you know, talk.
Go for a curry and you come back and you have a shisha. It's a nice relaxing thing to do.
It's a different vibe to anything else, to be honest.
Will shisha lounges really catch on? Who knows, as we progress towards an increasingly health-conscious society. But what shisha lounges do show us is that younger generations are engaging not just with Muslim and Middle Eastern culture, but mixing with its people on a social level.
1 chicken tikka masala, 1 chicken karai. Should be ready for you 20 minutes?
In less than 60 years, Muslim immigrants coming into the UK have created a £1 billion curry industry, employing at least 50,000 people.
Chicken biryani with curry sauce and an naan bread.
Their food has had a huge effect on the eating habits of the British. And if the saying, "we are what we eat," is true, then food has also played its part in bringing Britons and Muslims closer together.
Thank you. Enjoy meal. Thank you.
So, as Muslims mark the month of Ramadan and prepare to break the daily fast, we should be reminded of the way their tastes and flavours have shaped our British culture and our nation.
Please can we have 1 lamb danzak, 2 sagaloo, 1 chicken korma, 3 lamb karahi, 2 beef madras, 4 naan, 2 lamb tikka, 5 lamb masala, 6 boiled rice, 1 beef vindaloo, 2 chicken rogan josh, mint yogurt mango, 3 chicken biryani, 6 pilau rice.